Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome along to our May Koha webinar. My name's Fiona Borthwick. I'm Head of Sales and Account Management here at PTFS Europe. And for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm just going to be taking you through the Koha administration area. And really by the end of this swift webinar, I hope you will see how configurable Koha is and how easy it is to administer on an ongoing basis. So for those of you who have been at previous webinars before or are familiar with Koha, a lot of this may be you're already very aware of it, but for those of you who aren't, then I do hope that it's useful, and do ask me any questions as we go through. I'm just going to share my screen and we will get going. So hopefully my screen is visible. Sam will let me know if not. So as I said, we're going to look primarily at the Koha administration area, but that spans across admin and tools. So we'll be delving into those two areas. But I'm going to start by looking at permissions. So when we log into Koha as a member of library staff, we're presented with a login page. Koha is accessible via a URL on the browser, so you have to identify yourself as a valid user. Now, I'm just going to log in using my username and my password. And because our demo system is set up to be a multi-library system, multi-branch system, I have to select a library, and we can make this a required setting if we wish to do so. And that's a system preference that we'll be looking at later on. So I'll just set my main library here and I'm going to log in. Now, what it's going to ask me for this time is a verification code, because on my user account, I've got two-factor authentication enabled. So I'm just getting the code from my authenticator app on my phone. You do not have to have two-factor authentication enabled, but it is an extra security trigger there. So now that I'm logged on, I'm just going to come in and have a look at my account. So I'm just over on the right hand side here. I'm going to come in and toggle into my account, and from there I can take a look at my permissions. Now what you can see immediately is that access to all librarian functions is enabled here. This is super librarian permissions, which essentially means I have access to everything on the system. Now, I can come in and have a look at these. So for example, this administration panel where we're going to be looking at today, I can expand that and we can break that down into all the different permissions that are available within the admin area. So what it's possible to do is to assign your staff users permission to an entire group of functions or to individual functions within a group, and that is your own choice. But for now, you can see that I've got access to everything, and over at my summary screen on the left-hand side as well, you can see the permission set there is set to be Super Librarian Patron. If we return to the home screen, this does mean as a user with access to everything, that I have all modules available on my home screen and accessible through my navigation bar at the top here as well. In contrast, if I log out as this user and I log in as a volunteer user, and again, I'll select the same library, you will see that this user has far fewer permissions than me, and therefore things that are missing are things like acquisitions, but also Koha administration that were the focus of today's webinar. And equally, they're not accessible from the top bar either. So that's the first part of administration, is setting up your users to have the specific permissions. And just to show you that in this particular user record, if we come in and have a look at their permissions, this is actually blanked out because it tells me you're not authorized to set the permissions. So as a super librarian, I was able to set up this volunteer record with minimal permissions, and they're not allowed to edit them. So anything they're not allowed to do will be grayed out. So also they can't delete their records and so on as well. So for the remainder of the session, I will just log in as myself. So I need to put my two-factor authentication code back in. So just grab that, 791452. Okay, so within Koha, the vast majority of the configuration options are available within the Koha administration area here. Now, this is accessible from a button on the home page or from the More menu in administration. Both take you to exactly the same place, but as I've just shown you, you do have to have permission to be able to come in to work in this area. Now, this particular page is subdivided into various sections. So we have the system preferences area, which I'll come to in a little while. Then we've got a section for basic parameters, for patrons and circulation. Over on the right-hand side, configuration options relating to the catalogue module and things you can do with your records, acquisitions, and additional parameters. Now, we have only got a very short period of time for this webinar, so I'm only going to pick a few of these to take you through. But the layout and the sort of look and feel of all administration is the same from one policy to another. So we'll just pick out some to look at as examples. So the first thing is to define our libraries on the system. Now, one thing with Koha being an open source solution is that there aren't any license restrictions on its use. So as many simultaneous users as you need for members of staff, etc., can access Koha. And that also means that if you have the requirement to add an additional library on at any point whilst you're using Koha, you can do so. Unlike some proprietary vendors that require you to contact them because there may be an associated cost with adding an additional library onto the system. So if you find that you need to edit your library records or create new libraries, this is where you do so. So we've got the option to create new at the top here, or we can edit from the right-hand side. Now, what you're noticing on this screen is that we are displaying it tells you how many records it's displaying, and it's showing in a tabular form. Now, if there's more than one page, you can then toggle between the pages, and everything is searchable within a table as well. So if I was looking specifically for main, I could search there and it limits that search for me. Obviously, I can see everything on one page, but when I've got multiple pages, that can be quite helpful. The other thing to note is the tables can be reformatted by using your little arrows next to them, if you want them in alphabetical order by code, for example. And I can configure the columns that display here as well. And this is consistent across the board. So what I'm showing you here, you'll see as we're going through and within the other modules within Koha as well. So let's come in and have a look at the main library. So I can edit that. You can see that every library on the system has to have a code, and that's, again, standard throughout all configuration within Koha. Everything has got a code behind it, which can be used for reporting purposes and so on. The name of the library is what displays throughout the system, and then you can put as much or as little information on as you like, including all the address information, phones, emails, and so on. And then the email paths that you should be using if you're emailing from the system, whether or not things like this library can be used for a reservation or a hold pickup location. And if you want to, you can put kind of opening hours and display them and so on as well. So we can edit anything at any time, or if we wanted to create a new library, you get the same form here that you would just start to edit as well. We have library groups. Now, library groups are really useful if you're in a system that has multiple branches, or perhaps you're in a part of a consortium. And library groups allow you to limit your libraries into defined groups for various reasons. Primarily, they can be used for searching purposes, but very importantly, they can also be used for reservations, for holds, and for users as well. So if I just have a look at one of these, let's have a look at the libraries in the West, for example. We've got the Hunt, the Low, and the Main library configured in this group. And if I come in to have a look at the actions, we can see that they're currently set for searching. So they're grouped together for searching, and they're grouped together for being locally reservation group, so you can set your configuration to target these local groups first. But this is the other one that we mentioned. You can use library groups to limit patron data access by group, and also to limit item editing by group, which is really, they're really powerful configuration options. So it's basically saying you can give your library staff access to patron records or access to edit item records, but then restrict it so that they're only able to see and work with those records within their own library group as well. Okay, so if I just move on to have a look at some of our other administration options. I'm just using the menu option on the left-hand side rather than going back to the administration homepage. The next one down I want to look at is item types. And as its name suggests, this is relevant for items in Koha. So this is your copy, your holdings. And basically, item types are essential for working with circulation. So they're kind of got they're used for two purposes. They identify what the material is, but also they feed in, as I'll show you in a minute, to the circulation rules. So when you're setting up your item types, you can create your form here. Again, you've got your item type code, you put your description in, you can limit them into search categories as well. So if you wanted to put, for example, audio visual material into one group, so that on the OPAC, the user just searches audio visual, but it will then search across item types that are audio books, ebooks, whatever else you wanted to all group together, you can do that. You can put icons against them. You can specify if they should be hidden in the OPAC. You also specify whether or not they should be considered for circulation purposes. You can assign rental charges. So if you make a charge for somebody to borrow this particular type of material, you can put that in there. And you can have daily and hourly rental charges as well. You could put in things like check-in messages. So if you want the member of staff to be prompted each time they check in something with this item type. So for example, if it's a textbook that has a CD attached to it and they always have to check that the CD comes back, you could put a wee message in there. And you can limit item types to libraries as well. So if you wanted to, again, in multiple library systems, if you want to use specific item types within libraries, then you can do so. And an example of that is this artifacts item type we've got set up here. You can see from the table, it's got one library limitation. And if I come in to have a look at it, you can see that that's set to show an education library. So if I'm logged in at the education library, I can see the artifact item type, but I can't if I'm logged in at any other library. Okay. Moving down into my patron categories now. Now, again, there's two reasons you need to set up your patron categories. The first is obviously to identify the type of users that you have on your system and be able to categorize them, run reports on the different categories and so on. But importantly, they also feed in to the circulation rules. So it's important that you get both your patron categories and your item types set up as you wish. And again, you can see that we've got a table format, as I showed you before. You can search within your table, you can configure the columns to display, and so on and so forth, just as I said before. Now, we can come in, if we have a look at this adult discount one, if we just come in to have a look at it, you can see that this one has an enrolment period for 48 months. So you can assign default expiry times on your categories. So when you register a user with this category, Koha will automatically generate an expiry date, in this case, 48 months from now. You can also enable password expiration. So if you want to say that you, so I'll just come out there. If you want to say that this user should be prompted to renew their password after so many days, you can put password expiration period in there. It is also possible to put age restrictions on categories. So in this particular one, this example is an adult discount. So we are saying in order to fall into this category, they must be a minimum of 18 years old. So when I register a patron, if I put the date of birth in, Koha will always check that the date of birth falls in to the age requirements for a patron category that you have selected. So I put in a date of birth that made this user 17 and I'd assigned them to the adult discount category. Koha will not allow me to create that user in that category. If you charge users for becoming members of the library, you can put an enrolment fee in. You can see at this point as well if the users with this category should be sent overdues. Also at this time you can see if they should be charged when placing reservations or holds. Again, you can specify if it should be limited to particular libraries. And then you can do some other things with the passwords. So we can say if we want to have a minimum password length on the user record and if you want to have a strong password and so on. And then some other things that they can do. Can they place interlibrary loan requests in the OPAC? And then what kind of messaging preferences it should be as well. And this is a default for the category and can be changed on an individual user basis, but everything here is a category level. So now that we've looked at our item types and our patron categories, I can introduce you to the circulation and fine rules matrix. And this is where we can define how Koha is configured for circulation in terms of what libraries are on the system, what users, what item types, and therefore what borrowing can take place. So we can have one set of standard rules for all libraries. Or we can have rules for individual libraries as well, and they would always be checked first. And it tells you at the top here that the rules are applied from the most specific to the less specific in this particular order. So it will always look for user's library, user's category, user's item type first. If it finds a match, it will apply that rule. If it doesn't, it will then keep going until it does find a match or it will apply the default category. So this is where you can see that the matrix has a combination of the patron category and the item type. Okay, so in this case, we are saying that, if I just find an example here, here is somebody, the patron category of just patron with an item type of book. They are allowed to borrow 3 items. They can have them for 21 days. And if we keep going along here, you could see that they will be charged a fine of £1.10 every day. And you can put maximum fines on that and so on. And if I just keep going along, you can see as well that it goes on quite substantially. So for example, they're allowed 3 renewals, again for 21 days. And it goes on. And you could put down how many holds they're allowed. And if there are any recalls and if they're allowed discounts and so on in there as well, your rental discounts. So your circulation fine rules, everything's done in the one place, which is great because there are other systems where they've got separate rules that then build up a circulation map, but everything's just done on the one place here. And you've got other circulation type configuration further down as well. So you've got your things like your default checkout hold policy by patron category, and default holds policy by item type and so on and so forth. So that's kind of all I wanted to show you in terms of the parameter settings. And I want you now to have a look at the system preferences. So system preferences dictate a lot of the behaviour and appearance of how Koha works. And there are, I don't know, probably in excess of about 300 of these, and they're grouped together by module, which you can see on the left-hand side here. And then within the module, they're subdivided. So if I click onto circulation, for example, you can see that we've got subheadings here which match what's on the left-hand side, and these are all clickable links too. However, all system preferences are searchable. So if I was interested for having a look at things that are relevant for override, I can just search for override and it will then tell me what group it's found in and what subgroup it's found in. So for example, in my checkout policy, I've got this system preference, all allow fine override, which says allow or don't allow staff to manually override if a user has fines owing. So a lot of our system preferences are drop downs, don't allow, require, don't require, and so on and so forth. But we do have other ones where we are saying if fields should display. So I'm just going to have a look at this unwanted, for example. And we've got this borrow unwanted system preference. And if we click on the link here, this gives us a list of all the fields that we can have in our borrower registration record. And then we, as system administrators, can then determine what fields we want to be visible. We've also got system preferences relating to things like CSS for styling on the OPAC and styling on the staff interface as well. So for example, here's your OPAC user CSS. And we can have a look in here and we can see that we've got some CSS that's applicable on our OPAC. Going to do a system preference search for library. And again, you can see that you've got this one here, this force library selection when logging into the staff interface, or don't force. And right at the start of the webinar, I pointed out that on my login screen, it said required next to selecting the library, and that's come from the system preference here. So there's a lot you can do within these system preferences. And I always advise when I deliver training in Koha administration that the systems team spend a little bit of time just reviewing the preferences and set the system up how they want to do it. I should also say that any changes that you make to configuration in Koha take effect immediately. There is not any overnight scripting or processing required to activate those changes. And those people that do have test servers, we always recommend doing the change on the test server first. Now, there are some configuration administration areas within the tools section. So I'm just going to briefly touch on those. This is where you will find your calendar. So you set up all your closed dates on your calendar, and that therefore Koha then makes sure that nothing is due back on a day that the library is going to be closed, and you can copy holidays across really easily as well. This is also in the tools area where you'll see your notices and slips. So any correspondence that's sent from Koha, whether it's something like informing the user that their interlibrary loan's now available for collection, or that their books sitting on the hold shelf waiting for collection, or that they've got overdue notices. This is where you can control what appears in here. So again, we can search within our table if we wanted to, bring up our overdues, and I can have a look at this overdue notice here. And you can see we've got a folder here for email. So this is where you can see what fields from the records will display and what the text of the thing will read. And you've also got the same if you are a library that uses SMS notices, you can set up what the notice text should be in there as well. You can also use HTML within your notice text files, as you can see here, so you can put your own sort of branding on them as well. And talking of HTML, I just wanted to finish up by looking at another area within the tools, which is HTML customizations. And what's a nice thing about Koha is it allows you to add content to pages. So I'm going to just show you cataloging, for example. I'm going to open this in a new tab, a cataloging page, and you can see we've got all the buttons appearing here, but there's nothing underneath. So imagine I wanted to add something to this page underneath here. I'm just going to do a very quick example of that. So I'm going to add a new entry, and I'm going to find catalog. So I'm just going to, so in fact, I'm going to look at staff cataloging, and I want staff cataloging home. I want it on the cataloging home page. I can display it for all or specific libraries. And let's say I'm going to publish it today. and I can put an expiry date on it as well if I want. So let's say it can come off tomorrow, and I can just put some content in here. So just put test. And obviously then I can put some styling in. So cataloging, no, I'll just say, please click here to access the reports. And then I could have a link, obviously, into the reports saying, I'll just put test. And let's say I want to put this part here into bold, and I can style it and do everything that I would want to do. Okay, so I'm just going to save that. I'm going to toggle back over to this other tab and I'll refresh the page. And now I've got this additional HTML at the bottom here. So this is a really good way for system administrators to be able to add content to the standard Koha pages that help their library staff complete functions and so on. Now I have just glanced at the time and that is me out of time. However, I have managed to cover everything that I wanted to show in this short webinar. As you can see, there is a lot of configuration options, a lot you can do. Hopefully you've seen how easy Koha is to administer and how quick and easy it is to make those changes. So thank you very much.